Hopefully everybody's in the right place. We're going to be talking about Duo and how you can use it for industry standards and frameworks. My name is Ned Zaldivar, and I'm a security architect for Cisco. I'm not going to cover every aspect of Duo, nor am I going to cover every single industry standard and framework. I have done a ton of research on all of them. There is a mountain of data inside the PDF. Some of the slides are hidden. As I said, this was previously a 90-minute, and now it is a 60-minute, so the content has been condensed a little bit. Please use the WebEx for questions. If I say I'm going to take the question offline, that means that we're just going to be short on time, okay? Don't, okay, clicker's not working. Oh, now it worked. It's the range? Oh, I got to be over here? Okay. All right. So I just picked a few sessions that you should look at. I did do a gentleman over here said he went to my session this morning. That'll be recorded. Of course, everybody will have access to it. It's identity-based attacks. I don't talk about that kind of motion in here. There is the same tool set that I'm using, but I'm using them for different use cases. I do also have a firewall, so if anybody has firewall interest, specifically automation for SD-WAN, I do have a session that's tomorrow. 10:30, I think? Yeah, 10:30. Okay. Okay. I gotta get used to that. A little bit about myself. I have been at Cisco for quite some time. That's probably how I got Ned at Cisco.com. I've been a speaker at Cisco Live. I've been lucky enough to continue to come speak, talk about all different types of topics. Right now I'm doing a lot of identity, and you saw I have a firewall session. I have a ton of hobbies. I like photography. If anybody wants to talk about this stuff, I'm only been doing it for now 5 years, beekeeping. So if anybody wants to talk about beekeeping, I can talk about that for hours. Anyway, moving on. Okay. We will be covering a little, because this is a 1000, I'll be doing a little intro on Duo, but I'll try not to spend a lot of time. But there probably are some folks in this room that haven't had exposure to Duo, and so that's why I'm covering it. But mostly what I'll be spending time from is what are the key aspects that are in almost every industry standard and framework, and how can Duo help you with those? So this is kind of the identity primer. I will try to go through this quickly, but at the same time efficiently. I think everybody understands where we were 10 years ago, or maybe even 20 years ago in the IT world. Identity was important, but it wasn't as important as it is now. And that is because you use identity every single day, and we've been doing it in our lives all the time, but in the digital space, we haven't been doing it as much. We've been getting away with things like IP addresses, and that was what was used for identity. That's all changing. Anybody okay with what I've set up here? You know, you gotta use a passport, you gotta use a driver's license to drive a car, or you sometimes have to use your identity when you're purchasing items. So primary identity factors, something you know. I think everybody understands this concept. An ATM PIN is the greatest example of that. That is something you know. The something you have, if we're talking about the ATM again, that would be the card that you use for, that would be the card that you use when you put that is something you have that you're putting in the card. For Duo, that would be the authenticator. Almost always your phone, but it can be other things as well. Certificates count as something you have. Usually those are managed and pushed down, but that is something you have, or a token. You can see there's several types of. The YubiKey is a type of insertable passkey token, and then there's also a rotating key token that you could use. Again, something you have. Something you are. I think everybody has been familiar with, especially if you have phones. We've been doing touch or face for quite some time. That biometric is definitely something you are. Now these other identity factors, and then there's a kind of a variation. You know, how many people understand passkeys or have used passkeys? Okay, that's good. So passkeys almost always are tied to some identifier, either a PIN or your biometrics. So that's why I kind of have it in something you have and something you are. Another key identifier, somewhere you are. So location becomes a mechanism that you can use. So a newer feature that we've implemented, and I'll show you a demonstration of this, is using BLE. So the authentication and the authenticator have to be next to each other. Otherwise, you never get this green, and you can never approve the session. We also use egress IP, map it to geolocation, and then more recently, in the last few years, we've added understanding risk based on the networks that you connect to, and we use an anonymized Wi-Fi fingerprint. It's like a hash value of your SSIDs. One-way hash, we don't keep that information, but we use that as a mechanism to understand risk of your session. So that's something where you are. Something you do. So we all do interesting behaviors, but behaviors that might be relevant if you register a new device, new authenticator, you connect with a new device. If you connect at different times of the day that you don't normally do, different countries, atypical travel, those are all something you're doing. And then we have some ways of understanding suspicious behavior. It's actually a requirement now from people that are required to use MFA, government. Some of the standards require this to be able to have interaction and notification. So we have an email notification that would go out to your administrator, and then you as an end user can participate in notifying that you see something suspicious. So other identity factors that you probably have bumped into, probably in your consumer life, not your IT life, is something you know. The problem is that when it's a question or a picture, it's not typically counted as a strong point of reference. And so oftentimes as an identity factor, it's like another identity factor. So it's usually tertiary or even further. I gave two examples. I'm sure you've seen others, airline application, and then also an Apple ID. But with 863, these are not considered, and then also Duo doesn't consider it strong enough either. We don't use it as an example. Anybody run into these? Have you guys seen these? Yeah? Okay. All right, so real quick on Duo, so we can stay on time. So Duo is a verify. So at first, the first kind of motion of what Duo is it's a verification of a user, and we use an authenticator to do that. And then we also leverage your database. So whatever your directory is, we integrate with that database. Now, Duo recently became a directory and an identity provider, so it can actually host identities as well. In fact, you can do an all passwordless motion where you never have a password if you want. We also support trusted device. One of the things that's different about Duo is we can do trusted device, of course, with Enterprise Mobility Manager or Device Manager like Jamf or Intune or Workspace ONE, all that, that whole market of managers, but we can also do it without. We can use this app as a mechanism to provide trust as well. And the last is, what are we connecting to? What type of application? So that's really what makes up Duo. I mean, obviously there's going to be your username and password or passwordless, that motion. That's how we verify who you are, the trusted device, and then finally the application. Okay, as I was stating earlier, there are certain things that Duo is, and then there are certain things that aren't Duo. I mentioned some of them. Primary authentication source now. We're also an identity provider, so that makes us an identity access manager now. And then recently we added identity verification, which is pretty cool. Has anybody seen that, identity verification? If you came to my morning session, you saw it. There is a demonstration in there, and you can see the full demonstration. I only mention it in this talk, but it's an important aspect of onboarding, self-service, as well as help desk. to prove somebody out. So the things that we're not. We're not a identity governance administration, even though there is some of that stuff in there. It's just not where we're focused right now. And then, as I said earlier, we're not a device manager or a mobility manager. You can ask a question if you want. Sure. So the question is how close is our IDP with Okta? So Okta does do identity governance and administration, so we don't do that. But as far as the other capabilities, we're very strong, and we offer some things that Okta does not offer. Yeah. Okay, so architecturally, what does Duo look like? So on the left-hand side, there is your browser can be a mechanism of source. We have agents, so we have a Duo desktop agent that can work on Mac and Linux and Windows, and then we also have Duo Mobile that works on your devices to be an authenticator. Those provide device visibility. They can also help you establish device trust as well. There's a policy. Duo is only a SaaS application, so that policy lives in a SaaS application. And if we're going to public applications, we can be we can be an SSO provider, or we can just integrate with an existing SSO provider. So that's up to you. As part of that, we do offer a captive portal. So for mergers and acquisitions, it's a great way to connect users to connect users to your applications. And then, if it's public applications, of course, we're connecting to those cloud-hosted applications. Oh, we do also integrate with your directory. So I mentioned SAML and AD. Of course, now it can be its own directory, so it could be its own directory as well. And then for private applications, we do offer an element that can live on-prem. It's called a Duo Network Gateway. Runs in a Docker container. You can scale up that Docker container. In fact, Cisco's own method for the longest time, until recently, was we used identity-based access, and we used Duo and the Duo Network Gateway. So we weren't so concerned about inspecting traffic. So all we wanted to do was provide access to applications in a kind of zero trust model. And so that was our foray into that. Since that time, we've now rolling out Secure Access. Anybody heard of Secure Access? Yeah, a few of you, okay. So of course, that is the other way that we can also integrate. We can integrate with Secure Access. We use the Duo desktop as a mechanism to provide posture, and then we can connect to any application via FQDN, CIDR, Wildcard, etc. All right, now we're going to get into the heart. That was the intro. Now we're going to the rest of it. The presentation is all like how does this help you with an industry standard or framework? So there are kind of 4 pillars that I use to talk about it. Obviously, there are other pillars that might be important. If there's one from a feedback perspective when you fill out your survey, please share what you think should be on the list that I'm not covering. Just give me points for I only have an hour. All right, so inventory is first up. Every section has this little cheat sheet. It talks about the major standards. If there's not a standard on there that's important to you, in the PDF, there is a much larger table with many, many different standards. But this is like a snapshot of the most common ones that you may have to align to. And then it talks and references exactly how you could align and achieve those from an audit perspective or a compliance perspective. Okay, anyway, for your reference, I'm not going to read every one of them. Okay, so for user visibility, so Duo, to have user visibility means the directory has to be connected to, of course, has to be connected to Duo, and then you have to be securing an application. So if you are not securing any applications, Duo will not have any visibility. As soon as you start securing an application, then I start gleaning your user visibility, what device they're using, as well as all aspects of their user and what they're accessing. So example at the bottom, you can see an authentication log. where I was not allowed to access, looks like RDP for using the Duo Network Gateway, but then I was granted access to Salesforce as an example. And then at the top, it kind of shows you the little bit of the flow there. So I'm using still traditional non-passwordless, so a password flow. And then I'm using a Duo Push. There are different types of Duo Push. This one is the one that's more advanced that I talked about. And I have a demonstration of that, so I'll spend some time in a minute. With the visibility that you get with Duo, it does provide details like a small snapshot of what applications are what users are logging in, if there are any inactive, how are your credits doing, are you bypassing any applications? Yes, we do support bypass. That's a use case where if somebody's MFA is broken, you may need to get somebody on without MFA as an example. So bypassing is supported. We do also capture logins, and you'll notice that I have several inactive users, so we also keep track of your inactive users. That becomes an attack surface. So you can see in this account, there's 77 inactive users as an example. If you're a Duo Advantage customer, you have access. I was just, sorry I didn't catch your name. No, okay. Anyway, this gentleman over here, I was telling him that he has access to it because he's an Advantage customer, but it can connect to your directory. So the big advantage is that even if you haven't secured all your applications yet, where Duo wouldn't have that visibility, if you connect your directory directly to Cisco Identity Intelligence, then I can glean devices as well as users that are connecting to any of your applications. And I can start analyzing from a threat as well as a posture management and hygiene of what you're using. And it has really good analytics. And there's hundreds and hundreds of checks, and you can enable and disable those checks. There may be a reason why one check is failing, and it might be your standard that you don't have to have that, whatever that check is. But anyway, my point is that it's a great level of information that you get. As part of that, it also does a scoring of the users. And then we've just started sharing that scoring with other products within Cisco. Secure Access consumes that scoring. Firewall and ICE consume that scoring. XDR, so Cisco XDR also consumes that scoring. But technically, it can share it with anything because there is a full API, and you can export, you can send this to anything. So it can be connected directly to your SOC, et cetera, or your SOC's application. Okay. I don't know how many clicks it takes, but anyway. So the next screenshot is, I just went a little deeper so you can see we do connect to multiple providers. So one of the big advantages with this is we're not just looking at one identity source. We could look at all of your identities. Think acquisition, or think maybe you have an AWS account and you're using the identity that's in AWS, but you're using Entra on-prem or Active Directory on-prem. So we connect to all your identity sources. Workday is another one we connect to natively. So anyway, that gives you a good view of what's going across all your identity sources. And then we label and then also provide a trust level of how your users are doing. And then you can start using those things to, if somebody has a questionable credit score or trust score, then you can decide, how they're allowed to access applications that you may consider, more secure. So, question for the audience. So, if I'm verifying a user, is sending a text, SMS, is that strong enough to verify a user? Does anybody think that? Okay. What about a passcode? If I just open up a passcode and that's what allows me to gain access, is that strong enough? Okay. What about an MFA push? Stronger, right? It's an application, it's encrypted, it is stronger, but would be subject to potentially maybe push bombs or a spray attack of some kind. Verified push, that's another way to protect. Proximity. This is really cool. So now, if I'm tying the two things together, my authentication and my authenticator, that really ensures that whoever's on the other end that's making that authentication is the person, and you're verifying at that time. YubiKey, so something you have. I think YubiKey also supports touch as well, so those are two mechanisms you could do. That's a pretty strong mechanism. Passwordless, I mean, that's the bar, right? It's very hard to bypass passwordless now with the way that the analytics work on these devices, both on the consumer devices that we use as a business tool as well as our laptops. It's very hard to bypass those. I'm sure it's possible, but it's very hard. So the industry defines it as it must be phishing resistant, MFA, to consider somebody a verified user. And then I have this like little handy table, if I can get it to show, and it kind of classifies all the things that I talked about. So the things that are the highest risk, I didn't talk about phone call, but that's a pretty risky, there's social engineering with phone calls. You don't know where the phone call originated from. There's a bunch of caveats to that. But as you go up, your risk goes down. It also starts qualifying for very high assurance levels. So if you're familiar with AAL or AAL2 or 3, those are the ones that are very up at the top, though. So that when you're trying to comply with, say, NIST, you're going to be up there at the top. Is where you need to be. So there are kind of 3 times that there's high amount of risk. Help desk is a pretty high risk. So you've probably seen in the news how help desks, that is one of the ways that people can try to phish or attack. And because of that, you need to be able to identify a user. Now the ways of doing it, the more traditional ways of doing it is you would send the user an email, or you might even send them a SMS or a text. Those are risky kind of solutions. And then, not just help desk, but onboarding a user or remote onboarding. Or if I'm broken, like my authentications aren't working, how do I self-service and get myself on? I mean, maybe I go through help desk, that might be what your solution is, but all those times are the most riskiest times. So how do you get around that? So what Duo did is they implemented something called Duo Identity Verification. This is a joint with Persona, so you do have to have a Persona account. It connects to your Duo account, and then you go to verify.duo.com. So in the help desk scenario, what happens is you push a button in help desk, you get an access code, and then whoever you're talking to, you say, go to this website, verify.duo.com, put in the access code, and then you start the process. And then we match one of these identifiers. We do support, Persona does support custom workflows, so it can support a student ID or a corporate ID or something like that. And then we match the picture to who you are. And it works really, really well. So if you've not seen that, I do have a demo in the other session that I do, 2164. So you can watch it in 2164 if you want. I didn't have time to do it in here. But anyway, it's a really cool way to prevent, yes, go ahead.
Real quick, what level of licensing do you have with Duo for this?
So the question was, what level of licensing? I believe you can do it in Essentials. It's really, you just have to have Persona. Yeah, you just have to have the Persona account. I believe the way they do it is there's a cost for the account, Pro or something, Essentials or Pro, and then after that, then you have a certain number of tokens, and then if you go over, then you pay for per token basis, something like that. Good question. Thank you. All right. So now we're going to move to device visibility. So how does Duo get device visibility? So 2 core ways. So one is we can get it from Browser Insights. So that's the blue box at the very top there. I can only see operating system, and then I can see things like the browser that I'm accessing. So that would include even embedded browsers. I would see that version. So think like AnyConnect VPN, where you do like a SAML login, and there's an embedded browser. We can see the AnyConnect version in that case, as an example. And then the other way we do it is via a desktop application. It's called Duo Desktop. So this is what you see in the log, and then this is what the application looks like. It was formerly called Duo Device Health or Device Health Application, DHA. Now it's called Duo Desktop. We also get a view of your authenticator as well. So if your authenticator has been registered, some of the things that we do a little bit different is we do device security on them. And you can force like biometrics to be enabled so that when somebody has to have so when you're doing an authentication, you can enforce that biometrics had to have been opened before you get to that. You can also have that disabled so that it can be more user-friendly if your biometrics is not fast on your device, as an example. But then we look for jailbroken. We also look for password set. But you can see all the details of my device are enabled. And if I have multiple identities, the multiple identities thing is interesting. So some of the other vendors, every identity is a license. But at Duo, let's say you had an admin persona, and then you also had a user persona. Well, those would be the same license. We charge by the body. We don't charge by the identities that you create. So it's a different licensing model. It does shrink your cost. So if you're paying for licensing for your contractors, and this is a good place to go because you can lower your licensing all around. Okay. The other place we get visibility is in the Advantage license with Cisco Identity Intelligence. The big advantage here is we don't just get the visibility from Duo, we get it from any directory or any integration that we've done. So in this case, you can see I have some Azure, and then I also have like JAMF has been integrated. So I get device visibility from multiple sources of information. I think this is like one login. I probably should have put the titles of those logos under, but anyway, it gives me the granular detail of what operating system, and that gives us kind of visibility of what's going on. All right, so I think we're at our first demo. Okay, it's a Salesforce demo, but it's really to focus in on the use case of seeing inventory. So you're going to see me log into Salesforce. You can see my authenticator over here. I am doing a traditional Active Directory, which is being synchronized to my Duo directory, so I'm not using the IDP. You can see some things, some advanced features like warning on device posture or OS level. So I'm just warning, so I'm still letting the authentication. Now I'm doing push. So you see how it's gray, and then it turns green? I cannot accept it until that happens. So what do we see inside of Duo? So first thing we see is both user and device inventory. You can see I have some out-of-date devices, out-of-date inventory. With the full authentication log, if we drill into that Salesforce session, you'll see how we gleaned or how we measured and got the information. So push was entered with Bluetooth, so that it kind of advanced proximity that we talked about. There's my user ID, there's my application. I didn't have any risks associated with my ID, so that's why it says no detections. But then I can see my operating system. I can see that I have a Duo Desktop. It shows my host name, and then it shows me some details of what Duo Desktop provided. And this actually even happens to be a trusted endpoint. And then there you can see my device and my egress IP as well. So it shows up in both places. All right, so that's kind of how we see user and device visibility. All right, so the next kind of pillar that's pretty important is there's this notion is if it's vulnerable or if it doesn't meet posture requirements, it shouldn't be allowed to connect to your applications. And some of them are very stringent, like PCI. You are not allowed to interface with any of the core components within PCI. with an unpatched system. It must be a patched system. That would subject you to fines and all that kind of stuff. Yep. So again, this is the reference slide. I'm not going to go through it, but it is in the deck that you have. But these are all the different standards, and then there's a larger one in the PDF. So how does Duo determine it? So based on that visibility for both user and device, we can see what's vulnerable, and then we can use that as a mechanism in a policy. So you can see I have 3 out-of-date desktops, 1 in Windows, and 3 in Mac, it looks like. Oh, and 1 in Android or iOS. I'd have to click to see which one it is. And then I have some browsers that also show out of date as well. If we click a little bit more, this is where you get the granularity I was talking about. So there's the AnyConnect version I mentioned earlier, how you can see that. You can see Edge, Chrome. You get a lot of granularity there. And then you also see not only the user, when they connected, and then how we got the information. Was it Duo Desktop or was it from browser? So what do we do about it? So you can apply a policy. So for OS controls, you can do, it's pretty granular. You can do what I showed earlier, which is like encourage an update, or you can set a drop dead, like if it's an end of life, or if it's not at a certain version, they're just blocked. So you have that capability, and then you can enforce immediately, or you have timers that you can also employ. So you got a lot of flexibility there. And the versions, when you say like it has to be the latest, it's keeping up with those versions. You don't have to do the drop down and select that version. You only want to select the version if you have like a standard that you're where you have to be at. For browser, you don't have as much. You can do things like this if it's out of date over a month. You can do from 0 to a year for what's allowed. So like our corporate standard is 30 days, but everybody's slightly different. So if it's over 30 days, then I can't connect to that application anymore until I fix mine. And then you can also restrict certain browsers as well. The other notion of known vulnerable is maybe you have a standard on what's allowed from a posture perspective. Supporting a security agent, I'm sure everybody has to have some security agent. We can check for that security agent. These are some examples of ones that we support. You have to go to the UI to get the full list, but anyway, you can go to this URL as well. But I grabbed a screenshot, I don't know, just before this session or whatever. But the UI is going to have the most up-to-date. From a user experience perspective, when you're not compliant, if it's something that we can do a workflow for, it will give you an action and kind of step you through how to fix that problem. Sometimes if it's a managed system, you won't be able to make those changes, but it will give the help desk a good view when you call them about where the problem is. It tells them exactly why they're not compliant. In the slide deck, there is a reference, and it shows what's supported with Browser Insights, and also with Duo Mobile and with Duo Desktop. Anyway, you can reference that. And now we're on our second demo. So this is going to be preventing known vulnerable. The definition of known vulnerable is my firewall is disabled. I consider that a vulnerable endpoint. And then also the OS version is not up to date. So just like before, primary authentication. So my firewall was disabled, so you can see I can't connect. So it's guiding me to fix my endpoint. So I have access to make these changes. I know that in a managed system, you don't always have access. But for the contractor use case or just be getting that visibility to help desk gives it's a lot of value. It saves, it shortcuts what you can do and how you can fix somebody. So now I'm reconnecting. Primary authentication again. And now you should see the OS warning. So we gave the firewall, we wouldn't even allow a connection. But the OS warning is not we're not doing mandatory. So we give directions on how you should do your update, but we're not blocking at this point. But you could. Just showing you an example of what that looks like. And then there's the BLE capability. There you go. I guess my wasn't on the screen. I had to move it over quickly. So what do we see inside the Duo dashboard? So I'll show you in the authentication log. So at the top there, you can see I have a granted with BLE that was allowed, and then also have a deny, and that shows the endpoint is unhealthy. The details of endpoint unhealthy, you actually see why it was unhealthy. Let me just scroll over and I'll show you. You can also see the reason the Mac OS is an old version, and that's the reason it got flagged. But there's the firewall showing that it's off. Yep. There's where it's on. Okay. All right, so we're in the third pillar. So we're in the home stretch. We're halfway through all the pillars. This pillar is going to be on multi-factor authentication. Now, every single industry standard, every single framework that you're trying to align to requires some sort of multi-factor, whether that's passwordless or I haven't seen anybody yet say it's required to have passwordless. Everybody's trying to get to passwordless. There's still a lot of legacy applications or requirements that you might have an older install that would require that use case. Like before, I do have a reference here of how it calls out multi-factor authentication for the different standards. I did look at the year in review. Anybody use the year in review before? Talos year in review? Okay, there it goes. And I just wanted to see what kind of popped up. One of the things that I thought was interesting, I covered this in my other session, but there was 180, in all the incidents that Talos worked, there was 78% growth in registering devices, meaning that was part of the attack, meaning the attacker had registered a new device and then used that to continue the infiltration in the environment. What that's saying is that they are really focused on looking like like everybody else and staying within your environment as long as possible. And then there were some details about spray attacks and what conditions came up. Anyway, it was a pretty interesting year in review. I don't think I provide the link, but if you search for Talos year in review 2025, you can find it. You can also compare it to the 2024 from an interest perspective. So how does Duo support MFA? From a policy perspective, by default, when you secure an application, you are enforcing 2FA. And then you do have these options, and as I stated, there are reasons that you might want to bypass. Of course, there might be a reason you might want to deny. Those are kind of core of how the product works, but that's the first part. Now, CISA makes some recommendations on what you should have. So phishing resistant, and they give you some pretty explicit. So FIDO2, web authentication, platform or roaming authenticator, or PKI-based MFA. I don't know anybody except for the government that uses or has used PKI MFA, CAT cards, or PKI smart cards. Does anybody use them today? I used to have some customers that use them, but they don't even use them anymore. They've all moved to this kind of FIDO2 and web authenticator. There are several integrations that don't support this, so I listed those. And then I also listed the URL that you can read this, but I'll just walk through kind of the recommendations. So I mentioned that you need to do FIDO2 or WebAuthn. I kind of checked the ones here at the top that are most important. Here's the new feature that I was talking about, require proximity with verification with Bluetooth. If you want to do Duo trusted endpoints, whether that's integrating with your mobile device manager or enterprise device manager, or registering the device using the Duo desktop, either way, that prevents, even if attacker has your password and you don't have strong MFA, if he doesn't have the right device that's registered, he can't get in. I think our push with proximity is pretty freaking cool. You saw the demos. Anybody not like it? I think it's really cool. Always a fan favorite. Report fraudulent. That's another thing that's in the recommendation, is not only have the ability to for a user to be able to report a fraudulent, but an automatic reporting of fraudulent as well. And so there's kind of two methods. We do the ability for an end user to say something was suspicious, and then we also send out an email report as well. The other recommendations they talk about is how to lock out users. And so there's a couple of different settings that you can use in the UI to do this as well. So unenrolled users or failed attempts, you can decide how you do those. Those are some defaults that I have selected there. You should always investigate denied authentications or pushes. That is another area. So you can see in this particular user, there was this huge spike. I know it's only 2, but the point is that should be investigated. Those are analytics that we provide. They can be exported to your SOC. That would give you an indicator that a user's compromised. And then phishing resistant, and then risk-based authentication. So you want to have those risk indicators pop up. Sometimes there are some false positives associated with them, especially this unrealistic travel. VPN, as an example, can trigger that unrealistic travel. But it does work very well when you don't have that VPN use case coming up. I mean, if somebody's intentionally using Tor and VPN to go to different POPs, of course you're going to trigger something like that. Yep. So one thing that we can do to not only improve the authentication, we can do something to improve the user experience. I wouldn't say this helps you from a standard perspective, but it does help you from a user experience. It's called Remembered Device. And what Remembered Device does is, after I've logged in, I use a cookie, and that cookie is used to really trust that device going forward. Anyway, that's a mechanism that I can do. And then down here from a log perspective, you can see that I authenticated, and then it says my device is remembered. Over here, actually, it says it's remembered. And that's because the authentication is within a certain amount of time. Now, one thing that we did recently add in the capability of Duo is with Duo Desktop, that can support something called Duo Passport that preserves your session, but it also eliminates cookies. So things like Evilgenics or something that's an adversary man in the middle, that's a way to protect. I have seen this pop up in a couple of standards of protecting your tokens and protecting OAuth sessions. It doesn't talk specifically what you implement. I think we're at the beginning of those from a standards and frameworks perspective, but it comes up. With Duo, you do get a clear visibility of who's using MFA and how they're using it. So you can see I still have SMS passcode enabled on this. So that would be the one I want to get rid of. It's only been used once, but it'd still be one I want to get rid of. Let me see what else is on here that I might want to get rid of. Maybe just plain a Duo push. Oh, that's a passwordless Duo push. Everything else looks okay. Just that one passcode I'd probably want to get rid of. With identity intelligence, if it's connected to your directory, you don't just get to see what Duo sees, you see everything. That means if somebody is only using their password to access applications, you see that. And so here's an example. Looks like 11 sessions were done with just username and password. So, I mean, that's worth, from a hygiene perspective, investigation. You can actually even do filtering and narrow down the type of user. So, like, let's say it's an admin that has password, username and password. I mean, that would be not good. But you can also see there I have Duo Phone and Duo SMS. And so overall, this helps you get to the assurance level that you want from a NIST perspective. You can see right here what assurances that are in process on this platform. So identity intelligence gives you that visibility. It also helps you with compliance because all the checks align to some sort of framework. So in this particular one, this is for no MFA configured. It calls out the exact standards and frameworks that you have to, including CMMC, that you have to comply with, or that you should be complying with.
And I had a question, I don't know if you answered. CIA included in Essentials or?
So the question is what license level is Cisco Identity Intelligence included in? It's an Advantage license.
Advantage?
Yes.
This was which acquisition was?
Yeah, CII was an acquisition, or Cisco Identity Intelligence. It came from OORT, O-O-R-T. It was a couple of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, something like that. Good question. So we get raw data as well. So it's not just a graphical user interface that summarizes things. All the raw data and where we got it is available to you as well. All right. So let's do our risk-based protection and remembered devices demonstration. So again, these are features on MFA. You can see the kind of the new policy format if you've not seen that. I'm enforcing MFA. I'm enforcing remembered devices, not just for user experience, but just better overall use of multi-factor authentication. And then I'm changing the time from 30 days to 3 days. But you can, I changed it to 7 days, sorry. You can change it. Okay, so I'm in my session. I'm using Nicolas Cage. You have to have at least one user session to be a remembered session. A remembered session will mean I won't ask for your credentials again, because I'm remembering that device. There's the proximity I talked about. And there's the pop-up that you have to accept. This is what does that cookie that I talked about. It's a policy thing, so if you don't want remembered or if you want to enforce every single authentication, that's up to you. So I'm just going to log out and then show the user experience one more time. And then we'll be in the final section. So that's how, notice there was no 2FA or passwordless, and that's because I was using remembered devices. All right, we're in the final section, least privilege. I think everybody wants to be least privilege, zero trust, however you want to say it. Technologies like VPN were kind of the other direction, where it was a full tunnel VPN and you had to define ACLs, and most people didn't. They just used their identity authentication as a mechanism to gain access. Getting back to kind of least privilege and zero trust really enforces you only have access to the applications you're allowed to have access to, period. So Duo does support custom users and groups. With a custom group and policy, You have a notion of a global policy and then a customized policy that can be laid on top. You'll notice that in the when it overrides the global policy, it crosses out, so you know what your policy is being used for. It does follow a hierarchy, so it goes group is most specific, then application, then global. And then you can assign it based, those groups can align to directories. So like you can see here, I'm synchronizing with an Active Directory. It's called smlab_AD. So anyways, you can synchronize with groups that exist in your directory as an example. There are some things that you can do beyond just plain access. You can also restrict based on country. So we have a database of countries that you can use. And then we also can restrict based on anonymous networks. So if we see, connections from Tor or proxies, then we can use that as a mechanism to prevent access as well. I mentioned the Duo Network Gateway. So here's a little bit about that Duo Network Gateway. The original presentation had a demonstration with Duo Network Gateway, but I've now since re-recorded it with Secure Access. So I'm going to show you that demonstration. I talked a little bit about this capability as well, which is you can have this is our own internal Cisco IT's version of Duo Desktop, Duo Central. It's provided with Duo SSO, but this helps me register and access some applications that maybe I couldn't access. It is a notion of least privilege in that you define what somebody sees, and you can make some items invisible based on group, or visible based on group, however you want to say it. So the Duo integrated product is called Duo Network Gateway. That's kind of that Duo Docker container that I showed. There is a full demo of this in previous sessions, so you can watch that. And then I'm going to show a demonstration now with Secure Access and show you what that looks like. So I have the Cisco Secure Client, and you can see it says I need to verify my identity. So this verification, I'm using Duo as a mechanism to verify my identity. So think of this just like a SAML login, no different than any other SAML login. And I'm using Windows Hello with a passkey and a PIN. So different than biometrics, but anyway, that's how I did mine. So now it shows I'm re-enrolled or now completely valid. The traffic that I'm capturing is private application traffic with Secure Access. So that means if I'm going to those private applications, it all goes through the Secure Access cloud. So some time has passed. Because I needed to go configure a application that required step up. So I went and did that. I configured something to have step up, and I'll show you what that looks like. So what this is showing is that I'm currently in good status. I'm enrolled. So endpoint is still functional, et cetera. So now I'm going to go try to request something that has step up authentication. And you'll get to see what that flow looks like. I actually use RDP as a mechanism, but it doesn't matter. Whatever application, it would be private, because that's what Secure Access is capturing in this case. So I'm trying to connect to my remote desktop, and you'll see that I can't, because it's wanting me to do a step up. This is an option. This is not a requirement. It's just showing you the capability that you could use Secure Access and Duo together as a mechanism to do least privilege. But because I was using Remember Devices, you see it was like a flash. It just opens up the SAML window and then it authenticates, and then I go on. So now I'm entering my credentials for the remote desktop. If I was doing single sign-on, of course, that could also be transparent. Yes, there's a question.
You did do the VPN for the Secure Access.
So the question was, I'm doing it for VPN. It was not a VPN session. So the session VPN was actually disabled. I was using Zero Trust. It's a different module in the Secure Access, Secure Client, formerly called AnyConnect. Okay. So this is the secure access log event. And so you can see, the part I wanted to show you was, right here, user reauthentication. And you can see the details of what protocol I was using, my endpoint details, so what operating system I'm running, do I have endpoint firewall enabled, do I have disk encryption enabled, and then what type of connection. And then the Duo authentication log, if I can get the click to work, is right here. So in this case, you can see Duo Desktop was providing information, and it also verified that I was running secure endpoint as well. So now we're in the final throes of it. So at the end of the day, Duo across these 4 pillars helps you. You can see the bigger table underneath there. This is a larger table of all the standards that I have on like 3 or 4 different screens in very, very small font that I'm not presenting here. But it helps you with these pillars. So inventory, the user and device visibility, vulnerable, preventing either a posture element like operating system that may be out of date or end of life, or maybe you don't have the security agent, maybe your firewall is disabled, something like that. That also would be considered known vulnerable. Those are 2. Requiring MFA or not requiring MFA, and then what type of MFA should you have? Should you have that proximity MFA that I talked about, or a phishing resistant MFA? And then least privilege, the last example I gave, using either the Duo Network Gateway or secure access to gain access to your applications. And I want to thank you guys for coming today. It's always a pleasure for me to present to you guys. If you have questions, come up. Please complete your session evaluations. If you found something great, if you even found something that was just okay, score me well. If you didn't find anything you liked, score me well, just tell me about it, and I will go fix it. I promise. Continue your education, though. There's that identity track that I mentioned. There's lots of great sessions to do. If you want to have a free identity security assessment, there's a QR code you can scan that will get you connected with somebody. They actually use the Cisco Identity Intelligence tool to scan your network and scan your data for identity threats and identity posture management. And then last, thank you. Thank you guys for hanging in there.